Have you ever wondered how red light therapy actually works and why it's being called a game changer for recovery, healing, and even gut health? In today's episode, you're going to discover the science behind red light and infrared therapy and how it stimulates your mitochondria to improve energy, recovery, and overall performance. We'll also explore how targeted therapy like the FlexBeam device delivers powerful results through direct skin contact, and you'll learn practical ways to incorporate these therapies into your routine. By the end of this episode, you're going to have a clear understanding of how red light therapy can transform your health and optimize your performance. Before we dive in, if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Best You podcast. And I am super excited today to be joined by the one and only Bjorn Ekeberg. I'm really excited because, I was just talking with Bjorn beforehand. We've had so many different episodes on all things nutrition and fitness and sleep and so many different areas of health and fitness. But one thing yet that we have not covered is red light therapy. And Bjorn is the co-founder and CEO of Recharge Health and creator of a device called FlexBeam, which is the world's first targeted infrared therapy device designed to naturally accelerate recovery time for active individuals. And so today we're really going to be talking about what red light therapy is. And one of the things that I'm really excited to start with today here, Bjorn, is I know that the first thing that I think of when I hear red light therapy is saunas. And in doing some of my research for today's podcast episode, there's a lot of different terminology that is important to understand when you're thinking about red light therapy and sauna. So I know there's red light therapy, there's infrared red light, there's infrared sauna. I want you to break down some of these terms to give us some context for the conversation, and then we'll go from there. So give us some context on what the different terms are that sometimes get all thrown into the same bucket.
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy to. And thanks for having me on and for discussing this topic that when we got started, I co-founded this company about 6 years ago. This was so marginal, like it was being known in certain circles. And now I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard mention at least the red light therapy. Some people may have tried it. And it's because word is spreading or awareness is spreading that this technology is something, right? That there is something here. But there's a lot of confusion around the terms as well, because it covers quite a big broad range, right? So think of it from the outset that the sun that we're exposed to every day, that we often take for granted, supplies us with a whole wide electromagnetic spectrum of energy. There's a little part of that spectrum, if you map it out or draw it out on the line, there's a tiny part of it that is what we know as visible light. Colors from red to green to blue and everything in between. Most of the spectrum and all the energy that comes from the sun is either in like very high frequency range, like microwaves and gamma rays and ultraviolet. And on the other side of the visible light, bleeding from red, which is sort of the last color that we can see with our eyes, is a huge band of energy that's known as infrared. So infrared is generally invisible. It's just off of the visible part of the spectrum. But it is associated with heat, and it covers like a really wide band if you draw it out. So lots of different wavelengths within the band that we call infrared. And this is important to understand or to keep tabs on the different words being bandied about, because red light therapy generally, like typically, if you see it in sort of a fitness or recovery kind of context, it is usually an umbrella term for both red light and near infrared light. And infrared sauna that you want to know is often in the far infrared range. So it actually is a different wavelength altogether. Now, there are certain baseline benefits around infrared and heat and these kinds of things. But for the purposes of what we're discussing here, a lot of the most documented and the most profound benefits of red light therapy come from near infrared light. It comes from light that is slightly invisible, but able to penetrate the skin and can actually reach into your cells and communicate with your cells below skin tissue. So Infrared sauna has a very different kind of uses and effects and has its own reasons to use it, but it doesn't have the same kind of stimulus that you're looking for in a very specific near infrared range of wavelengths.
Okay. So it sounds like this has been perfect start. So basically, when we're using the different terminology, we're distinguishing between different wavelengths of light. Is that correct?
Yeah, like different bands of wavelengths of light, and it's very specific. So just to illustrate with some numbers, even imagine a scale from 0 to 1500, something like visible light is between 400 to 650 nanometers. It's called a reference. So something happens in the red light range around 625 to 635 millimeter wavelengths. Wavelengths with a certain dosage output in this area will actually stimulate the skin, like skin healing. This is why you may have come across, like if you've heard about red light therapy, many people have heard about it as cosmetics. So there's these like face masks and there are all kinds of things you can do that have cosmetic applications. That is typically only red light, because red light is very effective for collagen production, elastin, and so on. And you don't need a very powerful dose for it. So you just need a certain consistent light in a certain range. But then the magic really starts happening at about 800, between 800 and 850 nanometers. So just off of that visible spectrum, there is a bandwidth, so to speak, that all the research has shown back from, this goes several decades back, and NASA started developing this in the early 2000s. So it's not a brand new discovery. Is that light in this range can stimulate the mitochondria directly. The mitochondria in your cells will respond to this light and basically start working faster and therefore doing what it's best at doing, which is to repair itself and to recover. There's a more granular explanation of that. That's sort of just top level what happens. But it only seems to happen in this bandwidth, right? So a far infrared sauna at about 1,000 or 1,200 nanometers, it can make you sweat, but it doesn't actually stimulate your cells.
Gotcha. So when you get to that 1,000 to 1,200, it can make you sweat, but it doesn't stimulate your cells. What are the benefits? So like, you did a great job of illustrating the wavelengths and bandwidths as you increase and go up in nanometers, if you will. And you basically went from visible to near red to invisible, infrared light, and then to infrared. So what are like the benefits of infrared sauna then? Is it just heat? Is it detoxification? What are the benefits of like an infrared sauna when the wavelengths get super long?
Yeah, it's primarily heat and detoxification. So it is perhaps a bit of a technical point, but far infrared wavelengths, when they actually interact with the skin in such a way to induce sweat. So it's not that the wavelengths go so deeply that they contribute to some sort of deep detox. You just get a quicker sweat reaction. I mean, I like infrared saunas myself. I think it's an open discussion with people who are into saunas, as it were. Like if actually a heat sauna might be just as good as an infrared sauna. That's like, you can consult other experts on that. But it is primarily that sort of that sweat reaction. Heat can be good for lots of things. I mean, it can also reduce inflammation and it can like help improve blood flow and a lot of things that red light therapy also can do. But near infrared light has a very particular kind of response physiologically in the body. These wavelengths are able to penetrate beneath the skin. And that's, I think that's the crucial part to look for when you're dealing with red light therapy. The magic happens 2 to 3 inches in if you have a powerful enough light or one that is designed to penetrate. You can really reach the muscles, you can reach joints and so on and stimulate them in a way that we know of no other modality that can do this.
Okay, let's go back to what you said, stimulating mitochondria. So a lot of people listening to this know back from their first ever biology class that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell, and they essentially, help to create ATP and create energy for the cell. And also in mitochondria, we want our mitochondria to be efficient and able to produce a lot of energy in a short amount of time. But we also want to make sure that mitochondria are regenerated and reborn and renewed. So what exactly do you mean when you say it stimulates mitochondria? You said it makes it more efficient. Does it also make them kill off old mitochondria and regenerate new ones? Talk to us a little bit further about that.
And that's a great recap, by the way, Nick, like about the mitochondria, which is, yeah, most people know it from the biology textbooks. The energy generation is key. So what the research shows is happening to the mitochondria when they're exposed to this light is sometimes called a hormetic stress response, or is a similar mechanism where basically they are stressed a little bit so that they bounce back more strongly, the cells themselves. There is an actual ATP increase as a result of exposure. And this is something we're looking, I think we're approaching a time in research where it's possible to measure this more precisely at a cellular level. But this is clearly seen from the research so far. That in itself is huge, right? Because you get basically more energy produced in that area where you are exposing it.
And is that increase in ATP acute, or is that post the mitochondria are becoming stronger?
Yeah, it happens after the treatment.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's a response to the treatment. So it's not like the 10 minutes that you put a FlexBeam on, those 10 minutes, they go in overdrive. It's like you're producing a response in the body that's similar to, it's analogous to going to the gym and doing a workout, which is also hormetic stress.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say to drive home that analogy to all of you guys listening. You know, he's saying that when you go to the gym and you're lifting weights, you're not getting stronger in the moment that you're lifting the weights. You are breaking down the muscle, providing what's called an hormetic response, a good stress, so that after the breakdown, it builds back so that the next time you're supposed to be stronger. Same thing with the mitochondria. It's not necessarily that it's producing more ATP in the moment that the red light is being exposed to it. It's that it's providing this hormetic response so that in the future it can generate more ATP.
That's totally right. It happens immediately after, but it starts then accumulating, and there's cascading effects that are happening at the cellular level, like the processes that get started. So the recovery then happens after that. And when you sleep and you wake up, you have another cycle, like you're basically improving your system or giving an extra stimulus to your system. So it builds over time. It's not an instant. It's most often not an instant effect.
Right. And so I remember in doing my research for the conversation that oftentimes people using y'all's device FlexBeam start to maybe see some improvements after about 3 weeks. Is that when you really start to see the increase in ATP generation to be meaningful?
It really, really depends, is the boring answer, because it really depends on what you're treating and how much energy you're giving to it. The 3-week reference you make, this is to our own literature or to research in the field? Yeah, that's where we typically see in most cases, people really start noticing results by 3 weeks. You can definitely feel a lot of results, like results much, much faster, but it depends on what you use it for. So first off, what can you use it for? It's mostly musculoskeletal. Like any kind of musculoskeletal conditions are positively impacted by near infrared light in some way. So if you have something acute, let's say you pulled a muscle or you have like massive inflammation in a certain area, for acute issues, we find that people often get relatively quick results from FlexBeam. It can be very powerful for pain relief, for example, like immediately following like something that is already in throbbing pain. It can really reduce and soothe aches and then help relieve as well as kickstart a repair process. That's for typically like it just happened to you, or you just pulled a muscle at the gym, or you went too hard or something like that. For more chronic issues, which is what many people have, they have something, it's in the range from actually like complex medical, a chronic thing you have to overcome over time, or just something that you may have has been bothering you, but it hasn't really been in the way and it's been there for a long time. I don't know if you have any such like sort of aches or something in your own body, Nick, because you're pushing yourself all the time, that maybe just lingering and you haven't addressed it right away. So for things like this that we call chronic or long-term, you're also going to need more time to actually get healing effects. Right. So the 3-week window is for us to really play on the side of safety, that by then, really, if you have no results at all, we would refund you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, So let's go specifically into FlexBeam for a second, because you talked about how the wavelength, and the specific numbers of nanometers of the wavelengths, and then we've also talked. You brushed on it briefly, the depth at which the red light can penetrate your skin, and how the varying levels of depth dictate the benefits that you're going to get from it. You mentioned how near red, that 625-ish nanometer wavelength will help to heal your skin because it's more surface level. Talk more in detail about the importance of depth of penetration and the different depths that provide different benefits.
Yeah, for sure. And this was for us a crucial point when we got started. So we designed something. We set out to design our own device. I mean, if you search for red light therapy around the market, you will find multiple ways of getting it. Mostly it's in the form of a panel of some kind. It's a stationary panel or a light bulb. And this already existed when we sort of discovered the research and decided, hey, this is something we have to bring to people. So we wanted to design something for the body because that you can wear, or that is straight on the skin. And the reason is very simple. It's the pure physics of how this works. In order to get the real effect you want at the mitochondrial level, you need to be able to penetrate the skin. So in order to do that, you need a powerful dose, and B, the closer you are to the skin, the less of it is wasted, right? So if you have a blasting, like a big panel is going to get super hot, right? And so you can't really touch it. Like you have to stand at a distance. So already when you are 4 or 5 inches away from a panel, you have lost something like 70–80% of the output, right? It's literally a far away. And so similarly, if you see, I mean, it's a trendy thing that's coming, they're putting in red light in the red light rooms and stuff, and gyms are just putting in a red light. Of course, there may be a configuration with a super powerful light that's still going to have an effect. I would argue that's mostly just kind of a gimmicky thing, because that light so far away from you is really not going to have the ability to get under your skin and do the kind of treatment you're after. So that's why we set out to design something can be worn straight on the skin, and it has cooling fans in it so that it doesn't get hot, right? And by doing it this way, you're able to get a more effective treatment that's also in a way easier to use, because you can put it straight on where it hurts instead of having to expose your whole body.
Yeah, you've got it there. So it has different pads, or what are those? What do you call the individual lights that are on it?
Yeah, so it's designed like a belt. For those who are watching a video version, I'm just showing it here now. It's 3 light pods and the battery controller. The 3 light pods cover an area that's roughly equivalent to the small of most people's back, so you can have it across like a belt. You can do your lower back up along the spine. It's made of there's a silicone strap skit that's extremely flexible and bendable, so you can literally wrap it around your body anywhere you want. And within this zone, because you are literally wearing it on the skin, you don't lose any of the effect of the output of the light. Right, and this enables the device to penetrate as much as you really can with this kind of power output.
And what is that level of depth that it's able to penetrate to?
It depends on what's in the way, so to speak. Like if you're doing it straight on a bone, it's not going to get so far through the bone. If it's more open tissue, it's between, and we're working on more precise measurements of this, but it's in the range between 3 to 4 inches in. And this means that you're able to target an organ, for example, which is big if you're into health beyond sort of muscles and improvements in recovery and performance, is you can actually, I sometimes put it on like a liver, for example. I can reach that spot. And the reason I'm mentioning organs here is that's where you have the most mitochondria. Like most of the mitochondria in your body, they're all over your body, but they're really concentrated in like the gut and in major organs. So you can really sort of target, spot, treat a part of your body in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you're sitting from like 5 inches away or 10 inches away from a light bulb.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts that are coming. I'm going to say both of them. They're 2 different questions, but just so I don't forget about them. The first one, and you touched on it for a second, that you said you guys are looking to get more precise as to what depths you're able to, you know exactly what depths you're able to actually get to. First question is, how do you actually know? Like how do you read how far you're penetrating into the skin? And then second question that we'll get back to, I just don't want to forget about it, is you're talking about how we want to be able to get to the point where we can treat organs because that's where so much mitochondria is. Is there any idea of what kind of benefits can come with that? Because there's obviously all sorts of different issues that our organs can have from a malfunction perspective. Is there any kind of idea on how beneficial that could really be for certain issues? But again, let's go back to understanding, how do you understand how far deep you can actually penetrate?
Yeah, so we were able to, you can approximate it with an infrared camera and infrared light and watch it through the skin, right? So you can do these approximations. You can literally show, and we have videos of this, of like shining this particular light, and then you see it through an infrared lens. You see how far in that it actually goes through the skin, right? So it's possible to visualize this and do approximations for how deep it can go. There's also a mathematical model for how you can calculate it in terms of tissue. But to do a really fine, precise reading of how, for example, how far it will get into your shoulder, we would have to take you into a particular clinical setting in which the appropriate instruments are there to measure it. So this is something we're working on, like clinical studies as well, right? But it will vary a little bit with what the density of the skin and these kinds of variables. But in most cases, you get deep underneath with a powerful dose that's straight on your skin.
Great, great. So now let's go to the second one then. It's, with the idea that, man, can we get so deep to be able to penetrate organs where there's so much mitochondria? What do we have any idea of what kind of positive benefits that can do for the organs?
I mean, it's going to increase energy production and ability to repair in whatever local area you put it, right? So I mentioned offhand sort of liver. I would I would really advise people to consult your health professional / see it in the context of whether that's necessary for you or not. I used it a couple of times, particularly because my doctor was advising that there's a weakness in the liver that was seen on certain results, and I found that I could improve that, like by using red light therapy alongside with something that supported my liver. So I wouldn't tell people just go ahead and just randomly experiment on yourself. But as an illustration of how you can do a targeted treatment, one very popular application that most people can benefit from is over your gut, like for your general gut health. And what appears to happen when you put then, for example, FlexBeam straight, like vertically over your gut, and you expose it for 10 minutes in that area, is that you are promoting the good bacteria in your gut system actually get more energy, and then fending off and fighting the bad bacteria. And it seems to shift the sort of homeostasis or the balance in your gut flora, right? So I sometimes recommend people to use this if they're unsure if it has any effect, because that's sometimes the case if it's like an invisible thing and you don't have, it's an invisible treatment, and if you don't have pain in your arm or you didn't pull a muscle. If you use this for a couple of days over your stomach, I think most people I talk to, they will feel it the next day, and it's like, okay, something is happening. It has an effect on your gut lining. And as I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware, there's a very strong connection between your gut and your brain and your cognitive function and all of this. Right. So this is one of the most popular protocols we have for the device that are not geared toward muscles and recovery, which is sort of the main use.
Right. For sure. For sure. Does the device itself have varying levels of power output, or is it simply you turn it on and it's the same amount of power, if you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we wanted to make it simple. It's super simple, but we set 3 settings for it. So you just turn it on, but you choose between settings 1, 2, and 3, and it has to do with how deep you want to penetrate. Basically, to go back to the beginning, it has to do with the ratio between red and near infrared light. So FlexBeam, like most other typical like panel red light therapy devices out there, has both light in the red spectrum the 625 to 635 nanometers, and then also in the near infrared spectrum that we talked about initially in the 800 to 850. That's very common that both are in that ratio, but we set it up so you can choose one setting. One has predominantly red and just a bit of near infrared, so it's great for wound healing or surface skin type things. Setting 2 has equal amounts of both, so similar to what you find in a typical panel. And then we have a setting 3 that it's like max infrared, right? It's the one that we call the deep setting. It's when if you really need to reach into a joint, for example, which you can with like around an elbow or a knee, because the device is bendable, you can get light from 3 different angles and you can penetrate, and you can literally be able to stimulate into a meniscus, for example, which is a huge thing for a lot of the sports stars that we have that are, part of the company and are ambassadors for us, and like people who are professional athletes as well. That versatility and be able to reach deeply in.
Yeah, I'm assuming not for this next question, but do you feel a difference versus setting 1, 2, and 3? Do you feel physically a difference when you change the setting?
Subtly, I would say yes. It's in my experience. It's like it is. There's a different warmth and pulsation to the near infrared than you get from the red. So you can feel it, and you can feel the treatment, but it is relatively subtle. I don't know. Have you tried red light therapy yourself?
No, I haven't.
No. Because there's a certain kind of sensation to it, and when you use it, I mean, most people say that they can feel it's doing something, but then the question mark is like, okay, what is happening right now? And then all of that sort of fun biological questions about what is actually happening pops up.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of times how oftentimes when people do it, you recommend maybe around 10 minutes of exposure for red light. We used the analogy earlier of how it provides a hormetic stress, just like resistance training might do. You break down the muscle so it gets stronger the next time. Like resistance training and like a lot of hormetic stressors, you have to continually, slowly, but continually kind of like up the ante, if you will, or challenge yourself more for it to continue to provide next level results, if you will. Is there a similar idea with red light therapy?
It's spot on. It's exactly that, the same principle. There's a Goldilocks zone, or sort of an optimal power output zone, in order to get the response you're after. And this is one of the most difficult things for most people to wrap their head around, because we tend to think that more is better. I think your listeners are ideally suited to understand this principle, because you've learned it your own way. Just doing 3 more workouts right after the one you did is not going to make you stronger, right? So there is an optimal zone, and we often get asked this question: if you can use it too much, right? If you can overuse it. And the question is like, yes, you certainly can overuse it. It's not dangerous. It just means that you don't get an effect, because the effect comes from having just enough. Right. So this is this has been the most difficult part, and most challenging focus we've had in the research for the different settings and protocols. What is the optimal dosage? It has to do, in our view, power is important. A lot of sort of cheaper devices out on the market have very low power output and will claim to do the same things. They can't really do it from a sheer physics perspective. You do need a certain power. Otherwise, you have to sit with it for an extremely long time to accumulate the same amount of energy. But in order to get that kind of power output that you want, it's also a factor of how close you are to the skin and all of this. We time this in within 10 minutes. So when we recommend 10 minutes, that's one cycle. It will turn itself off after 10 minutes. You can easily do 20. It's not a problem, and maybe up to 30. We have a lot of protocols that we have a doctor on the team who's also designed like best use practices guidelines for how to make the most for each kind of thinkable condition that you might have. And often it's like 20 to 30 minutes to treat something properly. But upwards above that, we say if you do like for an hour, you're likely to not get any effect at all, right? You're just sitting and overdoing it.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be really hard to know. Like you have to just have a lot of repeated use and studies to really determine what that sweet spot is over time for people. And it just takes time to really figure that stuff out.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that, like the feedback you have to do with your own body
Of
and
course.
listen to what happens. So the typical recommendation is start with 10 minutes and then incrementally increase if it feels okay, and but not above a certain amount.
Right.
This is also a bit specific to what you want to treat, but for most cases, 10 to 20 minutes a day is plenty. And we even advocate taking a weekend day off, or every now and then take a break.
Yeah, for sure.
Use it.
For sure.
You can use it several days in a row, but take a break every now and then, and the treatment will be even more effective.
Yeah, it's funny how that is such an important principle for everybody to know for so many different reasons. I mean, I don't know why it was just popping in my head. Like, you know, it's the same thing for coffee, right? Like, at a certain point, you're going to not feel the effects of coffee as much, but if you take a week off, you're going to feel the effects a lot after that. So that principle is just very important to understand how there's usually a sweet spot, that zone where we should be putting ourselves in order to see the optimal level of response and the optimal level of growth from. So that was great. Last kind of question here that I'm just kind of curious is, you know, you broke down kind of the wavelength range. You know, you mentioned how 400 to 600 is visible light, then around 600 to 650 or so is that near red, so on and so forth. If the 400 to 600 visible light is kind of the colors that we see, what is, well, I kind of have a few questions all in one now that I'm realizing. What is the wavelength of sunlight? And then, you know, we one of the benefits that we get from sunlight, of the many that we get, is increasing vitamin D production. And so first question is like kind of what is the wavelength of sunlight? And then second question is, can red light provide any improvements in vitamin D production?
So the sunlight is full spectrum. Everything we get, if it's unfiltered in any kind of way, it goes the entire known electromagnetic range, and it's huge, right? So we used to think there was only what we could see, and then we discovered in the last few centuries with more instruments that there's all these frequencies, that there are radio waves and there's microwaves, and then all of the stuff in the infrared. So the sun has everything in it. And I mean, one of the remarkable things about the research around this is there are many other aspects, so there are many other wavelengths that also impact us in various ways, right? So in the academic field, it's called photobiomodulation. It's a study of all of this. It's basically the study of how light can modulate your body, or like impact your body. So there are certain effects from, you know, green light and from microwaves and so on. We're learning more about this. And it's in itself a very interesting field of research. But within all of that, red light therapy, or this red and near infrared, really stand out as clearly something that has a particular kind of response in the body. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, to use that that term, you also have ultraviolet, for example. That is like most of what we know as the harmful effects of the sun, and why we're cautioned against being in the sun for too long without protection, has to do with UVA, like UV rays, basically. They're entirely different from infrared. It's a completely different part of the spectrum. And, you know, it's arguable how damaging it is and so on, but that is the part of the spectrum of the sun that we know to be harmful. The red and near infrared is part of the spectrum that's associated with healing. Right. And it's actually been known for a long time before this research as well, the benefits of the light at sunrise and sunset. You could find this back in cultures like in yoga. It's been known for a long time that if you do, there's a reason why you can do your practice at sunrise. It's supposed to have a better effect, and so on. It is probably linked to the fact that when the sun rises and then it sets, it has proportionally much more of light in the infrared range. So it has more of that healing light from the near infrared naturally. Right. So in a way, what we have tried to do is to take that part which we know is beneficial and effective and concentrate it into a form. So you could put it straight on your skin and you get, it's more powerful there in that concentrated setting than you can get from just generally absorbing sunlight.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons that sunlight is generally very good for you, in my in my view, and I'm not alone in thinking so. If you look away from, there are certain things that can be harmful if done excessively, but sunlight is good for you, and it is in part because it contains red and near infrared light, and it reflects around you. It has a positive impact on our physiology, is what all the research is showing, right? So if you could live a life in which you were outdoors 3, 4, 5 hours a day, and you could sunbathe and you didn't burn or anything like this, you would probably get enough near infrared for any kind of healing. That would be much better than any other kind of treatment. But very few of us can and have that kind of access to the sun.
Yeah, that was great. That's great. Well, this has been super fascinating and a really quick but a deep masterclass on red light therapy, near red, infrared light, infrared sauna, and the whole spectrum of the wavelengths, if you will. So you guys need to go learn more about Bjorn, but really need to go learn more about FlexBeam and what they're doing with their company Recharge Health. So you can go to recharge.health in order to learn more about FlexBeam and the benefits. And if you want to get one, then you can go there as well. Is there any other good place that people should go learn more about FlexBeam or anything more that you guys are working on?
No, check out that first. We have lots of resources also for those who want to look more into the scientific studies and the breadth of all of that. We have a great database you can jump off from and suggestion for lots of articles. So yeah, I would recommend people to go check out recharge.health and start learning a bit more from there.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I read it, and they have a bunch of research articles, both from some of the things that they've done and some of the things that other people have done from a research perspective. And I dove into a few of those things in preparation for this. It's super fascinating. But this has been great, Bjorn. I'm really happy that we were able to finally do an episode on red light therapy. Like you said, back in the early 2000s when it first started to become a thing, it was probably seemed as far-fetched, and people probably didn't accept it very regularly. But now it's becoming more and more widely accepted as a viable tool to be able to use to further optimize our health and our recovery and everything like that. So really appreciate you coming on today. That's all we got.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, this is Bjorn's outro starting in 3, 2, 1. Man, what an awesome and fascinating episode with Bjorn. I mean, diving into the fascinating world of red light therapy and its powerful benefits of recovery, healing, and overall health. I really hope you found that this conversation was eye-opening and insightful, because red light therapy is something that probably most of us have heard about up to this point, but we didn't necessarily know all the science behind it and the specific applications of it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit the follow button on the Apple Podcast app or Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below so you don't miss any of the future insightful, educating, and motivating conversations. Here are my 3 biggest takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, red light therapy can help to stimulate mitochondria. Remember that it improves mitochondrial function by allowing it to increase its efficiency of ATP production, but it also provides a hormetic stress, meaning that it will allow mitochondria to come back stronger the next time. Just like strength training allows you to come back stronger, you're not getting stronger in the moment, you're getting stronger as you do it more and more and more. And then takeaway number 2 is that the FlexBeam direct skin contact approach provides targeted therapy like other things do not. It allows you to penetrate into your skin deeper to really ensure that you get the mitochondrial boost production, and it's not just healing the skin, which is good, it's just a different type of therapy. And then lastly, I thought it was interesting how red light therapy can even support gut health. He shows that he thinks and they feel, and there's some studies that show that when you have red light therapy on your gut, it helps to improve the healthy gut bacteria and gives them more energy, gives them more ATP to both repopulate and to ward off the unhealthy bacteria in our gut microbiome. It's just interesting. If you can do these things, if you can start to implement red light therapy into your routine, some of us it's going to be more practical than maybe for others, but I think that everybody can use this as a tool, as a weapon, if you will, to further optimize their health, to further optimize their energy levels, their recovery, and their performance. And if you do, it will allow you to get closer and closer to your best you.